Morning, friends and colleagues out there. Welcome to our webinar on the Disciplinary Literacy Standards for the preparation of middle grades and high school teachers. I am Sean Kotke, Manager of Educator Preparation in the Office of Educator Excellence at the Michigan Department of Education, and I'm joined by three talented colleagues who've been directly involved in the creation and implementation of these standards, and have them introduce themselves right now. Go in order from the slide. So Ahlam.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I am Ahlam Bazi. I am one of the education consultants in the Educator Preparation Unit.
I'm Christina Ponzio. I'm a professor at Grand Valley State University.
Hi, everybody. Janelle Williams. I work at Oakland Schools as a literacy consultant and also at Grand Valley as an adjunct professor. Glad to be here.
Right. Wonderful. So let me begin with some context setting, and then we'll go deeply into the standards and give you more of an introduction. So we've been focused deeply on literacy for the last decade of our teacher preparation, reform, and continuous improvement efforts. And so why? Why do we start with literacy? In case it's not obvious, age of our standards for teacher preparation. These are vintage standards. You can see on the screen the standards that we are replacing were adopted by the State Board of Education in 2002. And they were actually drafted throughout the 1990s at various points before becoming approved. So age, it's time to update them. Achievement, you see this is an old graph from 2015 of NAEP results in Michigan. And so seeing that highlighted has really initiated a lot of action in our state. And you'll continue to see these references in press releases from our department talking about Michigan's literacy achievement. Attention. So that achievement brought a lot of attention to the cause of literacy. One example is the Governor Snyder appointed a work group and denoted a lot of initial funding for many efforts to support higher literacy achievements in the state. One of those efforts, which actually worked very effectively and preceded some of this legislative work, was the General Education Leadership Network of Michigan Association of Intermediate School Administrators and their literacy task force. They came together and produced a series of essential instructional practices in literacy for different ages of students, going from, I have on the screen, K to 3 and then up through 6-12 disciplinary literacy. But there's also early childhood. There are many robust resources now for this. So it was really kind of leadership from the middle that launched us into some of this effort, building on these essential instructional practices documents. And so those are sort of the why. Now here is the how. The previous approach when we adopted the set of literacy related standards was that it started with the specialist level and then based that on the International Reading Association standards that were published in 1992 and 1998. And then took that as the main set, then pared it down to define a reading teacher, then pared that down to define what a classroom teacher needed to know and be able to do in the area of literacy. So it was just a watering down of this specialist level. Our new approach was to build a strong foundation for all teachers across the PK-12 spectrum, based on, again, these classroom essentials documents and the ILA 2017 standards that define lots of classroom roles. And then to build specialists on top of that. So we build a very, very rich foundation for all teachers, and then approach the specialists to see what's the highest level. And so, as you can see in this graphic, we've worked at various times over the last 8 years, starting in 2016, with the PK3 and 3.6 to build robust teacher preparation standards in literacy in these different grade bands. So began in the PK3 and the 3.6, shifted to the birth to kindergarten, moved into the 5.9 and 7.12 English language arts, and for one, but then also our math, science, and social studies, which have disciplinary literacy components within them, to finally our middle grades and high school disciplinary literacy standards, which are sort of an icing on the cake of, but not superfluous by any means, for our core teacher preparation standards and expectations. Right. So, Aklam.
Yes. And so at this point, teacher preparation standards were designed to prepare candidates to engage students in disciplinary thinking, writing, speaking, and representing, as well as reading and content area. This was possible through Dr. Kotke's continued literacy preparation leadership and the dedicated work of colleague Holly Crothers to convene and sustain MDE's collaboration with state and national literacy experts. This was needed to extend the literacy foci in lower and upper elementary. With us today, Janelle, the Oakland ISD literacy consultant and co-chair of the task force 6 to 12 disciplinary literacy. Janelle has been instrumental both through the development of the standards process as well as the curation and compilation of the implementation resources. Additionally instrumental is the collaboration between Christina and Janelle in proactively implementing the draft disciplinary standards in teacher education. We really appreciate the generous contribution of their time, effort, and expertise throughout this process, as well as all the committee members' contributions. Take it away.
All right, so Janelle and I are really excited to help you all start to get your hands dirty with the standards and to share with you some ways into exploring them, as well as to introduce you to an array of resources that we've compiled, created, etc., as a part of our own work in this regard. So the first thing I'm going to share is actually a couple possible homework options for you if you decide you want to do this. And I'll share the links to these in the chat. So when I first saw the standards, which I will also send the link in the chat in a moment, I knew that I was playing with them, like in a spreadsheet. That was actually where it started. And then at some point, so here is said spreadsheet, which I will share with you in case you want to print these. At some point, I realized I just really needed to print them off and start playing with them that way. And so one option for you that you could choose to do after today and potentially choose to do with your teams at your teacher preparation institutions is to do a little bit of this sorting. So I found it really helpful in looking at the standards to first start by assigning a topic, a few word topic to them. Because when you read them, you're like, oh, they're so wordy, which is great because they're specific. But also when I'm planning curriculum, that's less helpful. So you can see here that I've got the standards and I've added a keyword, and in some cases, some of the standards are grouped. And then the second thing I did was to go ahead and start clustering them in order of how I would likely teach them together, and then start figuring out what that looked like in sequence within my course. And then adding into it, what is sort of the umbrella unit that they're a part of, the essential question, the summative assessment that we're working toward, teachers being able to show achievement of these standards, and then any learning activities and strategies. So one of the resources that I'm just sharing with you that you might find helpful is to take and make a copy of this spreadsheet. And if you want to do something similar, you can go ahead. This is just my example of the topics that I assigned to them. And then, like I said, I printed them out, and I got real messy here with my Post-its and the printouts. If you don't want to do that, you could also play around with this Padlet tool, which is the same idea, has the standards on here that you can sort as you see fit, and you can add in the assessments and the plans for instruction that way. And so if you grab this link, it should, I might have to share a separate link because it should automatically remake it for you. And there's a video explaining how to use this. And so this could be a cool tool too to share if you're doing this work across with other colleagues at your institutions, to have an opportunity to get into the standards. Now, let's actually take a look at the standards. And Janelle shared those, I think, in the chat. So if you click that first link, that's the Michigan.gov link, that will take you to the current accessible form of the standards that we have. They will be eventually updated and not updated, but like the finalized version will be posted. And so what we want to invite you to do is to take a look at them and to consider the question, what themes are emerging for you as you consider the relationship between the standards? So if you want to put your curriculum hat on, you could do something similar to what I said and consider, what are some like overarching topics or themes that these would fall under to help you start seeing the relationship between them. And so you can we'll probably take at least like 5 quiet moments to look through them, but then you can feel free to share in the chat or even unmute if your chat, because I'm seeing this message that some folks, institutions might not let you use the chat. If that's the case, feel free to unmute and share. So please go ahead and skim away. All right, so I have no doubt that you will want more time to keep familiarizing yourselves with the standards. But for the sake of dialogue, I'd love to invite you, like I said, to share in the chat or unmute yourself and share if you can. What are some themes that are coming up for you? Yep. More focus on digital literacies. Yeah, Carlin. Hi, Carlin. I noticed that too, this idea of recognizing the existing literacies of our students. Tax assessments, writing and vocab, yeah. Yes, yes, the reflection of the social turn. Yeah, and I think in that regard, seeing that last comment, relevant and relational understanding of learners, just like with the literacy essentials, we're seeing the centering of learners, of their funds of knowledge, of their own inquiries for driving problem-based instruction. Yeah, Deborah seeing the connection to ILA, that was intentional, right? I look to you, Janelle, because I wasn't a part of that conversation, but yeah, yep. Yeah, I agree. They feel more meaningful, appropriate, and purposeful. So hopefully, like me, you are really excited to see these shifts with these standards, to see their alignment with ILA, to see the alignment with more up-to-date perspectives and research around literacy. Yeah, authentic purposes for reading and writing. Great. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now. Oop, oop, oop. Oh, no, actually, I'm going to say this first. We too identified some broad themes, and these were themes that are highlighted in the introduction to the standards, which is something as a resource that you'll also be able to look through. And so as you think about what you've seen highlighted in the chat and what you see here on the screen, we see that educators who are prepared to teach disciplinary literacy know how to position their learners as insiders within the disciplines. And they do that by considering how to support students in moving through the demands, the language and literacy demands, engaging in problem-based instruction using diverse texts and abundant reading, bridging their existing schema with their new schema, and continuing to expand their knowledge of words worth using, their meta-discursive knowledge and the patterns of thinking necessary to access the disciplines. And yes, thank you, Raven, for bringing that up, because I think that's a really important one too, the fact that it's highlighting the fact that the work of supporting students' literacy development is meant to be a wraparound effort. Wonderful. So now I'm going to turn it over to Janelle. And
yeah, and hi everybody. It's great to see some familiar names. I can't see your faces, but familiar names. I'm really excited to be here today. I just dropped a link in the chat to the introduction that we've been crafting that touches on a lot of the themes that you and Christina just mentioned. So we want to get to the part that probably will be even more exciting than looking at the shifts of the standards, although that's pretty darn exciting. But to really think about some resources that we've pulled together that hopefully support you in reflecting on your current, not only your current course, but maybe the entire program. And so I get the exciting job of talking you through some of those things. So in the resources for implementation document, which I will drop in the chat right now, we wanted to give you a little bit of a lay of the land for how it's structured. So it's set up like a series of tables the very top portion of it is for general resources that might be helpful for anybody that's thinking not only about just disciplinary literacy, but how it might play out within a teacher preparation program or course. So those are all linked at the top of the document with a brief annotation so that you can quickly determine which things might be most supportive for you. And then big thanks go out to Christina for also sharing with us a table that takes each of the standards and then groups some resources that could be helpful in targeting that particular standard. And I sprinkled in a few things as well, but those of you that know Christina's work will see that this is full Christina, very well organized, really well curated resources, lots of great stuff here. I'll also name that one of the things that we've threaded throughout or we've linked to throughout are the EduPaths online courses that have been created that align to the essential instructional practices for disciplinary literacy. And those courses are intended for folks that are at the beginning of understanding disciplinary literacy. So where it's appropriate, where it feels like they're supporting the particular standards or chunks of standards, we've linked those in as well. And the beauty of those courses is that they're 100% free, which is really great for our undergrads and grads. And also for our own learning. And then we wanted, even though it may be at the tail end of this 27-page document, we just want to name for you that a lot of time and passion went into the glossary. So that may be a tool that could be useful to you, your colleagues, and the students that you teach. Some of the definitions from the glossary come directly from the glossary of the essential practices document itself. And then some we've layered in because they're specific to teacher preparation. So that's a brief lay of the land of how the resources document is structured. We wanted to give you just a little bit of time to explore yourself and see which resources might be ones that you want to prioritize further exploring and why. So again, we'll take a few quiet moments for you to get into that. Into the document, click around. Everything's kind of structured around bookmarks and hyperlinks. So, and then we'll come back together and again, ask for a share out which resources you're considering exploring more fully and why it is. So I'll mute myself, give you a little bit of time to explore, and we'll come together in about 5 minutes or so. We'll ballpark that. Okay, see you back in a few minutes. right. I know it'll be hard to tear yourself away from your exploration of resources. But we just got a message that mics and cameras are now enabled. Should you choose to unmic and share your lovely face with us. So just looking for some folks either in the chat or by unmuting to share any resources that you landed upon that you are really excited to further explore and what it is about that resource that is feeling really relevant to you. We've already seen in the chat someone mentioning podcast, excited about the podcast, and some multimodality. What other things came up? Danielle already discovered the sample courses. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about those next. Glad you like them. And now folks that didn't come across the sample courses are frantically searching for where they are in the resources. Hey, Danielle, you weren't the only one to land on those. Okay, summative assessments linked with standards, videos. Yes, that's something that we always get requests on, but what does it look like? So having some videos is useful. Oh, great. Oh, so glad, Carlin. Hey, we would if you were Christina and I would love to see what you came up with. I'm sure it's amazing. Yeah, and I have to name that glossary wasn't just me. I worked really closely with Darren Stockdill at University of Michigan on that. I'll give him most of the credit. I maybe did a little tweaking. Great. Well, maybe we should transition to talking about the courses since it seems like they're getting a little bit of love.
Yeah, I want to say one real quick thing, Janelle, too, because I also want to plug those EduPath courses and all the work that you've done with the Literacy Essentials. So prior to heading back to the teacher ed world, I was in the K through 12 space. And so I have found it really helpful to circle back to those EduPath courses to draw some alignment between what practicing teachers are being trained in, so that that what our teachers and our programs are being trained in is aligned with that in terms of language and the framing. And so there's been a lot that I've been able to adopt from those resources too, in like building out slides.
And I will name, I'm going to pull up a one-page document that we use across the state around the EduPaths courses. And I know that, some of you may teach your course in an online way, and some may teach it in person. I believe we have the one-pager linked within the resources, but just so that you can have it at your fingertips. Not only do we have all of that course content available, obviously through EduPaths, through the online courses, but we've also taken that same exact course content, in fact, the storyboards or slide decks that we use to create the courses, and built facilitation guides around them. So if you wanted to, instead of having your students take an online course, you want them to interact with with the same content, but in an in-person sort of setting, then you have those slide decks as a starting point for you to make a copy of, and tweak for your own purposes. So try to make it flexible based on the mode of instruction that people are preferring to use with teachers and teacher educators. Yeah, well, why don't we skip on to the next slide, Christina, and we can talk a little bit about these sample course calendars. And since you were the originator, and then I kind of built my structure based on yours, do you want to talk just briefly about anything you want to preface about the course calendar that you created?
The first thing I want to preface, I can't say that word today, is that this has already changed a fair bit. And so I was reluctant to share what I'm doing right now because it is a work in progress, but this is what I did when I taught it this past semester. So yeah, you'll see the units of study, highlighting the summative assessments. You should be able to have access if you want to check out anything that I've linked in here and you can't get to it, feel free to email me or just, submit the request to say, let me have access to this. The rest of it, I think, is pretty straightforward in terms of organizing it by modules, topics, objectives, and standards. I've built these out more specifically. That was something that EduPath's resources did help with too. Some of the things I was doing in class. The one thing I'll mention that I think is maybe unique to what I'm doing in the class and might not be realistic, or you might choose to do it a different way, is my students at Grand Valley, the undergrads, take this course their last year. So they're actually in their placements. And so originally I was like, yeah, they're going to have placements where they can apply this stuff and make connections. And I was finding that it was actually a really big ask of them. In some cases, they didn't have mentors that were supportive or didn't have the expertise to support them. And it felt like it was taking away from their learning. So I incorporated a virtual placement where my students meet during our class time online with sixth graders at a school or within the context of a class where those sixth graders clearly need extra support with language and literacy, but they're focusing on doing literacy and language development in connection with a discipline that they've expressed interest in. So if you're interested in trying something like that out, I'm also happy to share more about that. But I think that's enough of an overview.
Great, thank you. And then I'll just name a couple of things. So Christina and I got together around a meal, of course, because that's how you need to have your meetings. And she graciously shared this course calendar with me because I was gearing up to revise the grad course that I teach at Grand Valley. And so I decided to keep a similar structure. So you'll notice very similar structure if you click between the two. And mine is a live working document. So I see a couple people in it right now. You might also see my students' faces in it because this is what they're accessing. So I'm making adjustments in real time. This is my first go round and I'll likely be tweaking things as I go. So just to put that out there and make myself vulnerable that I'll probably be learning a lot and making adjustments based on this. But it's a starting point for those of you that might be in a grad program or grad course that you teach. I'll also name that as I was thinking about application of the standards, it became really clear that while I may in the course touch on certain standards, there's a lot of connection and interplay with the other courses that students are taking. And so one of the things that Christina and I have been thinking about and that she's brought back to the broader faculty at Grand Valley is the usefulness of having a broader conversation about these standards because there is a lot of interplay. Much more so than in the previous standards. So just encouraging all of you, as you go back to your settings to maybe think about that broader conversation as well. Because in no way do I feel that in a 3-credit-hour course, I can really get the full depth of these really, really rich resources. Or rich standards. So just wanted to name that. And again, Hoping that you take a little bit of time. I know some of you have already dipped into this, and maybe you can continue your reading, but take just a few minutes to get into one or both of the course calendars. And this time we'd encourage you to think about how it might connect to, extend, or challenge the current course that you teach. And there may even be some questions that pop up that you would like to ask of Christina or myself or Dr. Kotke or Dr. Bazzi. And if it's a question that we're able to answer today, we'd be happy to do that. So again, we'll take a few quiet moments to read through with those questions as our reflection frames. And I'll invite you to find a pause point and welcome you back to share out either ways that you see these sample course calendars connecting to, extending, or maybe challenging your current practice, and or any questions that popped up while you were looking through. Maybe you're curious to know why Christina and I made particular design choices or selected certain resources. So we'd be happy to chat about that. Okay, so Deborah is wondering why did you choose to have virtual placements? That looks like a Christina question.
Yeah, so there are a few reasons. For one, I wanted the placement to take place during class time, so that my teaching interns or apprentices is what they're called this semester, literally get to lesson plan, teach, and reflect during our class time. And so given the fact that they're secondary students, it is a challenge, I think, to get them all physically in a building where this could happen. Whereas like elementary placements, I think sometimes doing place-based learning, it seems like it's a little bit easier, thinking about some of my colleagues who do that sort of work. The other reason is because I wanted them to have the opportunity to engage with students who, like I said, clearly needed support with language and literacy. Because when I'm trying to convince my math teachers or my phys ed and health teachers, like, no, this really matters. I can talk theory all day, I can show methods all day, but when the rubber really meets the road and they're online with sixth graders, and they're trying to figure out how to engage them with a text, they start seeing it at work. And so I had the great affordance of being able to partner with a school here on the east side of Michigan, just outside Dearborn, where I had previously been a literacy coach, to connect with a couple of their tier 2 reading classes, so that we have students to work with. So I had an established relationship, and so I've been able to just go in and start this, within like during my first year at Grand Valley. So those were the reasons. I have found though that the virtual placement allows, it really decreases the transition time. It means that I can literally pop through everybody's breakout room and observe them teaching, which isn't something I've had the luxury of doing when teaching a class like this at Wayne State or U of M. And so, yeah, there's just so much about it that's been super, super incredible and beneficial. The how, I could give you more of the nuts and bolts. I'm happy to share any more of the nuts and bolts around it, if people want to think about doing that themselves. But not right now. That's too much for right now.
I am super jealous. I wish I could make that happen. But also, I know my grad students are already knee deep in their own placements and teaching. And any other questions or connections? No, it's your brains are probably really spinning with lots of possibilities and potential next steps. I'll just say that Christina and I continue to collaborate together. We really want there to be a strong vertical articulation, knowing that some of the students that take her course will go on and take my course as well. So we want that to feel like a meaningful transition for those folks. And, we would be happy if you wanted to follow up with either of us and, kind of pick our brains or have more conversation. We're happy to do that. And in fact, I think we're going to transition to handing over to Dr. Bazzi to talk a little bit about next steps and some practical logistics that will be useful for you to have on hand as well.
Thank you so much, both Janelle, Christina, and to the amazing attendees for all these great questions and feedback. We want more feedback. If you can please complete the survey to share your input about the resources and supports that we can provide in subsequent sessions, be it workshops or other formats that we would like to hear more about from you. So the link to that has been added to the chat. Thank you, Christina. And also, if you have not yet been informed about the Michigan Assessment Consortium Assessment Learning Network Series, which begins September 30th, this is a great opportunity where you will have further collaboration time with both Janelle and Christina, as well as additional leads in the literacy work, and specifically assessment in the disciplinary literacy standards. If I can ask Janelle to add more to that.
Yeah, for sure. So this is an exciting collaboration between our disciplinary literacy task force and the folks at MAC who do phenomenal work. And we're really trying to have a conversation about what equitable assessment practices look like within a disciplinary literacy space. So it's a really unique, targeted conversation. For our kickoff on September 30th, Dr. Elizabeth Moji will be the keynote speaker. And if you've ever heard her speak on social justice implications for disciplinary literacy, you will leave really fired up and energized. And Christina will be another one of our keynote speakers, thinking through the lens specifically of English language arts. We also have an expert sharing about equitable assessment in mathematics at the secondary level. So we would really encourage you to not only consider registering and attending yourself, but in our planning meeting yesterday, we were able to secure a commitment on the part of MAC that if you had up to 4 of your teacher prep students that might be good candidates to attend this series, that MAC would give them complimentary registrations. So I'll be working with Dr. Bazzi on some more official messaging around that. But if that's something that you would like to know more about, please feel free after this webinar to reach out to me, and I'll get you in touch with the right people and so you can have that conversation. So just another exciting opportunity for us to continue to extend and complement the work that we're doing.
Thank you. That was definitely good news today. So we'll give you some time to complete the survey as well as the registration, and then move on to share with you the timeline for release of the application as well as the submissions. Okay, with 3 more minutes available to us, if there are questions about the timeline for the Disciplinary Literacy Preparation Standards implementation as illustrated on the slide, we are looking forward to the implementation of the revised course of study for fall 2025 during between October 1st, when the recorded webinar and the application is released, and the April submission window. There will be additional technical supports based on the feedback that is generated from the survey that you have completed.
Would you mind saying just a tish more about the recorded webinar and application on October 1st, what that means?
Sure. This webinar is being recorded, as was messaged earlier. And once the recording and all linked documents are ADA compliance aligned, we will release that with the application by October 1st. The application for the EPP teams to work on and submit a revised course of study. And we're referring to this specifically as a course of study rather than a course, because some EPPs already have these preparation standards in more than one place in their program across different courses and potentially clinical components, as well as one main course. As you've heard from Janelle and Christina, there's intentionality in the introduction and development of the standards throughout different opportunities in programs, in addition to a 3-credit course. And that'll look different for different programs. And so we look forward to the application will provide opportunities for responses that are narrative, as well as a matrix showing the alignment to the standards and where the program expects the candidates would have opportunity to develop and demonstrate the standards. Any other questions, thoughts? You won't be automatically kicked out at 11. So if there's anything that anyone would like to inquire on or later email myself, Dr. Kaki, Janelle, or Christina, you have all of our emails as well. Thank you so much for the feedback. Dr. Kaki, would you like to do the honors of closing for us?
Certainly. Thanks again to everybody who joined and stirred our conversation. It's been very enlightening. I hope you saw some how this set of standards is the culmination of the work that we've done for teacher preparation standards and literacy over the last few years, and centers literacy in our teaching practice. With that, we bid you adieu. Have a great weekend.